how can we react when we feel overwhelmed by everything that is happening, that is going on in our lives? I have chosen to work on this topic through Neurographica, and if you want to know what results I obtained, come with me. Welcome back to the 4-Body Journey channel, and welcome to episode 10 of my series Diary of a Journeyman, where I show you practically what kind of results and benefits you can obtain by drawing Neurographica and applying this technique to your life so that you can start changing it for the better. Now, I'm very happy because I've managed, finally to hit double-digit episode. This is episode 10 of Diary of a Journeyman, and I'm very happy that I've managed to hit double-digit. Of course, it's not, a super impressive milestone. I haven't hit like 1,000 episodes, but 10 is better than nothing. I started from not knowing even the basics of how to make a video, and I've already hit, double digits. So I'm very happy, and I hope I'll be able, to continue for many more episodes and, become better and better with, every time I get back at doing this. So this is the drawing that I made this week. And what have I worked on? So this episode is going to be very similar to episode 7, where I tackle the moment of intense emotional pressure, of intense emotional tension. And so what was I experiencing? What was I feeling when I sat down to start making this drawing? Well, what I was experiencing was a feeling of, I was feeling overwhelmed by everything that was happening in my life, all of the issues, all of the things that I have to, that was facing, that I still am, that created a lot of, tension, a lot of pressure in me, and that made it difficult, to stay focused and be able to tackle everything properly. From that point of view, I felt like a little boat in a stormy sea, where you have these massive waves that don't allow me to maintain my direction, to maintain my path, but that make it almost impossible for me to stay afloat. And of course, that makes it very difficult to, tackle everything. Of course, there is one thing that I do not want to do, one thing that I do not want to achieve through this drawing, which is becoming a victim, playing the role of a victim, having this victimhood mentality. That's not something that I want at all. That is not the way I act. That is not the way I behave. That is not the way I want to, move forward. Okay. I always try to figure out what I can do in a situation. I always try to figure out, how much agency and what kind of agency I have, because in my opinion, it's very important, and I never want to play the victim. Of course, there can be, that isolated moment, like when I started drawing, where you sort of feel at the mercy of, of the rest of the world, okay? Where you feel like you have no control, but it is fine if it is just a moment, okay? It can happen. No one can be, a bronze statue every single instant of their life. There can be moments where, you have a momentary falter, but you need to, pick yourself back up as soon as possible. And that was exactly the goal of this drawing. I wanted to figure out what I could do, not only to tackle this moment, this feeling, and go back to, to restoring my balance, but I also wanted to figure out how to make sure that I could do, whenever in the future this feeling comes up again, I'm able to tackle it properly and make sure that I can get back to my usual self as soon and as fast as possible. Now, as soon as I started drawing, what was the first aspect that I wanted to tackle? Well, I wanted to understand exactly what was going on inside me every single time I was feeling overwhelmed. And what I realized was that basically every single time I was in such a situation, my approach was always to sort of wait to see if magically things, went back to normal. Whenever there is an issue, I wait and hope that everything, resolves itself. And then when I see that it really will not, then, I will stand up and I'll tackle it and try to figure out what the best strategy for tackling it is. And while on the one hand, in some circumstances, it might be an okay strategy, it is still a very passive strategy, because rather than trying to tackle the problem right away, basically what I'm doing is I'm trying to, I'm waiting and I'm trying to hope that it magically goes away, that I have to do nothing. And again, as I said, in some specific circumstances, it might be an acceptable strategy and it might actually pay off. But in other circumstances, especially when the problem is very complex, like in this case, it is not a good strategy because just waiting does nothing. In this case, the more you wait, the stronger the feeling of, being overwhelmed becomes stronger. And so it will become more and more difficult to be able to tackle it properly, efficiently, and swiftly. I also started to scour my memory to try and find as many moments as I could in which I was experiencing this feeling, in which I was feeling overwhelmed. And I found some of these moments and I was able to divide them into two categories. The first category contained all of these moments in which basically the source of this feeling came from external pressure. So external events that were influencing me, significantly. The second category instead was composed of all of these moments in which the pressure came from expectations that I thought I wasn't meeting, that I hadn't met. And while for the first category of events, the solution is very clear and very obvious, which is the same solution that I reached in episodes 4 and 5 of Diary of a Journeyman, which was I need to strengthen myself, I need to strengthen my toughness, both mental, physical, and emotional. And for that, I already have a plan of action. I've already rolled up my sleeves and I'm trying to work hard in order to acquire that skill and solve this issue. But the second category of events is something that I have never had to tackle before through Neurographica within the context of my Diary of a Journeyman series. So in this drawing, I thought it was necessary to investigate this category of events, to try and figure out exactly why they come up and what I can do to tackle them, and ultimately to avoid having them influencing me so negatively in my life. Okay, so now the problem is clear. These expectations are the problem. However, what is the next step? And the next step for me was pretty clear. I needed to go back throughout my memory as far back as I could and try to figure out if there is a clear point where there were no expectations before, but then later they started to emerge and started to create issues. And I went back and back and back, university, high school, middle school. No matter how far back I went, I would always find some events where I had these expectations that were not met and that created issues to me. Now, these events were not particularly common. They were actually quite rare, but they were still there, somewhat scattered throughout my past. And so it is pretty obvious that it is not something that, as a clear starting point, but it's something that has accompanied me for basically, my entire life. And, what something interesting that I found while thinking about all of these events was the fact that whenever I was tackling an activity, or whenever I was working towards the goal, and I did not have any expectations, sure, I wanted to achieve that goal, I wanted to achieve the end point of that activity, but I did not set myself any expectations. Everything was smooth sailing, everything was going wonderfully, everything was going incredibly well, and there were next to no issues. However, whenever this expectation would come in, the path was never particularly straight and, clear. There were always problems, there were always issues, and so everything became, much more difficult. So something interesting, as you can see here, is the fact that these expectations are actually actively hindering me in my ability to achieve my goals. So I need to become very mindful of how I operate inside me, because I need to make sure that, as soon as these expectations form, I can go back and be like, wait a second, there are these expectations, be careful because this activity will have issues. So you need to go back there and tackle it as soon as possible to make sure that these expectations go away. And so at this point, it became pretty clear that I needed to try and understand why these expectations were, coming in. And after thinking for a while, what I realized was the fact that at times I tended to take some activities a bit too lightly. So I wasn't arrogant. I wasn't thinking, oh, I am myself, I am, the one, I'm the real one, the good one, the cool one. Everyone else is nothing basically, and so I'm gonna succeed. Yeah, sure. No, it was always more a thought of this activity seems easy to me, so I should not have any particular issues, to succeed in that. And so at that point, all of those expectations would set in, and then when it invariably came out that this activity wasn't as easy as I thought initially, and so it wasn't as easy to get to that, to the expectations that I had set to myself. The expectation was not met, and then I would be disappointed. And this is something very interesting to note because it shows a clear causation sort of for these expectations. And another thing I noticed also while thinking about all of these events was the fact that every single time these expectations came out, it was always related to activities that I felt I needed, I had to succeed in, I had to reach that level, I had to meet those expectations. Every time I had an activity where I wanted to achieve a goal, where I had no expectation but I wanted to achieve a goal, I didn't need to, I wanted, I was always, no expectation came out and I was always able to achieve that. Every single time I felt like I needed or I had to achieve a goal, then this expectation would come in and then their issues would arise. So from that point of view, again, another factor that paints a very clear picture of these issues, of, the source of these expectations, and that are starting to give me an idea on how I have to go on in order to tackle this and solve this problem. So now the problem seems to be quite clear, okay? So it seems to be clear that I am, loading myself, I am charging myself with these insanely high, unreasonably high expectations. But how do they come in? Well, for the most part, they basically come from within, from the inside. Basically, it's almost as if I sort of feel the weight of expectations from outside, as if I, know what the other people are expecting of me, even though they might not have even told me anything, okay? They have never told me anything, they never told me what they expect of me, but, in my mind, it's almost as if I can say, well, yeah, I know what they are expecting of me, and that builds up into these expectations. And so I have this expectation that I have built on my perceived, idea of the people around me, even though these people have never given me, have never explicitly told me that idea. So the more, I'm moving forward, the more this is becoming prevalent. And so this is clearly a very negative sort of mental scheme, because all of these expectations are clearly unreasonable and they are doing me more harm than good. So I need to start, being more mindful about what sort of goals I put for myself and whether they are goals or expectations, and I need to start becoming more realistic. I need to start becoming able to figure out more clearly exactly what is achievable and what not, and making sure that I don't set the bar too high. I need to set the bar high because I want to push myself and achieve as much as I can, but sometimes the bar can be too high where it's just not feasible to get there. Now, for the most part, as I said, all of these expectations come from within me. There are also cases where these expectations come from the outside. So if you remember in the previous episode of Diary of a Journeyman, I share with you my experience at the International Chemistry Olympiads, where I participated for 2 years. I won the bronze medal in the first year and I won the silver medal in the second year. In the first year, no one thought I would do anything. No one thought I would win the national championships. No one thought I would go to the Olympiads, and no one thought I would bring home a medal. Okay, and when I did, it was truly a fantastic moment because I achieved I achieved what I wanted to achieve. Ever since I started, ever since I got wind of the International Chemistry Olympiad even existing, but also I went beyond even the most incredible expectations I would have. And then the next year, everyone was expecting me to do better. Everyone was expecting me to win the championships again. Everyone is expecting me to go to the Olympics again, and everyone was expecting me to be better, to achieve, more than I achieved the previous year. And I did that. I won a silver medal, which is better than a bronze medal. So but together with all of the changes within me that I've already described that you can find in that episode, also there was this added weight, this added pressure, these added expectations that came solely from the outside that didn't help but instead created problems. So much so that, in general, I have a more positive, recollection of my first Olympiad than on my second, which is weird because in my second one I did better. But because of, all of the changes that I had within myself, all of the mental, sort of travesties I was about to face, together with this added weight of expectations, made it difficult to enjoy it as much. So I need to really be mindful and I need to really be careful about all of these external expectations, expectations that people from the outside are setting on me, and I need to make sure that I avoid having them influence me so heavily. Okay, so now that we have, sort of understood the problem a bit better, how can we go about it? How can we, start moving forward and try to solve it? Well, what I realized, and for this, the coloring part of the drawing came on, which is always, my favorite part. And it is a part that, made me realize something very important. In order to tackle this problem, what I need to do is understanding myself totally. I need to, sort of look at myself and understand every single little bit of myself. Every, corner of my conscious side, every little cranny and nook of my unconscious side, my shadow, every single thing about me at every level, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, at every single level. Because I need to understand myself perfectly, because when I do, to get coupled with the fact that, by knowing myself better, I can solve other issues that I am facing much, much easier. And so, it is definitely a positive aspect, which is, welcome, and it's not related to these specific issues, but it's still beneficial for me. But it also allows me to understand and to see and to notice immediately when an unfair expectation comes up, and it allows me to be able to tackle it effectively right away. When the expectations come from the outside, it's a bit easier to recognize them, right? It's a bit easier to tackle them, so it's not as big of an issue. But when the expectations come from the inside, they're much more subtle, and therefore it's a bit more difficult to, notice them right away and tackle them right away. So that is why I need to work on myself. I need to understand myself much better, specifically at an emotional level, so that I can understand, right away when these expectations are coming up, why are they coming up, and how I can change them and set realistic ambitious goals, ambitious goals that require me to work hard to achieve, but still realistic, still achievable, instead of, trying to set these unrealistic goals for myself that I am doomed to, not satisfy, where I'm doomed to fail, and where I'm doomed to, be negatively affected by. Of course, this is a very long and arduous task, because it requires me to work a lot on myself, and so it is something that I will definitely need to do, but it will take a lot of time to show some positive results. And at the moment, it's not going to be my main priority, because all of the practical steps that I've decided to implement from the previous episodes, they already have a higher priority than this one, because they're already working somewhat on, allowing me to understand myself better and to improve myself. This is a lower priority. It's there, but I will tackle it, sometime in the future. And it's most likely this, for example, will not even be the last drawing I will make on this specific topic. Most likely I will come back to this topic and work back on it again sometime in the future. And in particular, I think I need to focus on my emotional side, because not only the emotional side allows me to figure out exactly why and when these expectations come in, but my emotional side is responsible for a whole series of processes that happen inside me that all lead to negative consequences. So by understanding my emotional side as well as I can, it will allow me to solve a whole range of issues, not just this one, and so will prove to be immensely beneficial for my future and for my success. Okay, and now that our conversation is over, we have come to the usual step. Three conclusions that I can draw from everything I have shared with you so far. The first conclusion is that at times I tend to create expectations that are too high for myself, that are not helping me. As a matter of fact, they are hindering me, and they are not allowing me to reach the goals that I set out for myself. The second conclusion is that I have to strengthen my toughness even more than I already have, because I need it to be able to tackle any external difficulty. And the third conclusion is that I have to comprehend myself, to understand myself deeply and completely, so that I can understand right away if I am, falling in bad negative habits that are counterproductive for me, so that I can stop them right away from the get-go. Okay, now let's talk about practice. What am I going to do practically to solve this issue? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to work on my toughness, just like I decided to do in my previous episodes. So I'm going to continue to work on that. And then when it comes to this specific issue, I said already before that I wanted to work on understanding myself deeply and completely, right? Well, this is, as I said before already, this is a task that has a relatively low priority. There are other practical steps that I think have a higher priority that I need to work on earlier than this. But I can still start, to do a little bit in order to just have a few steps forward to ease myself when I'm going to have to work on this project, on this topic more intensely. So what I can start doing is starting to study this topic. So starting to understand how, how the physical side is structured, how the emotional side is structured, how the mental side is structured, starting to understand them better at a general level, so that I can sort of start to understand very generally, very abstractly how I work, so that then when I have to start, diving deep into myself, I can start, understanding myself specifically more in detail and more deeply. But I already have some, preliminary knowledge that allow me to travel within myself with, with a better understanding of how I operate. Now, this is my solution for this problem. And if you have the same problem or a similar problem, how do you find your solution? Or if you have a completely different problem, how do you find the solution? Well, this is where Neurographica comes in. Neurographic is a technique that allows you to help, you solve problems in a wide range of possible issues. And it primarily works in three different areas. So the first area is events of the past that negatively affect you in the present. The second area is the planning of your future within the topic that you have chosen in the most personal and effective way. And the third area is moments of strong and heavy emotional turmoil, where it allows you to restore a balance, and it allows so that you can go back and working on these issues, on these topics, with a bit more, where you are a bit more rational and a bit more calm, cool, and collected. Neurographica is also a very versatile technique, because you can work on it whenever you want, as long as you have some time where you can stay focused on the drawing and on yourself. You can draw Neurographica. You can draw Neurographica on any topic you want. You don't need to stick to a rigid schedule. You sit down, you have the blank sheet in front of you, you decide what you want to draw. It's fine. And also, you don't need to have a degree in art or to have done whatever courses. As long as you can hold a marker, a highlighter, or a pencil, and as long as you can observe yourself while you're drawing, from all aspects, you can draw Neurographica, and you will always obtain the best solution for you for that topic at that specific point in time. I am a certified Neurographica instructor, supervisor, and specialist, and I organize courses in which I provide you all of the tools that you need in order to start changing your life for the better. If this course is your first introduction to Neurographica, you can join my basic user course, where I provide you all of the fundamental principles of Neurographica, the rules of this technique, and where I teach you some algorithms, including this one, which you can start using right away to change your life for the better. If you have any questions, if you want to have more information about my courses, you can contact me through my social media profiles or to my email address. You'll find everything in the description. And with this being said, I want to thank you for sticking with me all the way till the end of the video. I hope you found it useful. I hope you found it enlightening. And if you want to share your experience with this topic, with this issue, or you have any question, any curiosity, you can leave a comment on this video. I'll be happy to read them. With this being said, thank you very much for staying with me all the way to the end of the video, and I'll see you next time. Ad maiora. Oh, you're still here. I'm very happy to see that. If you want, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, or you can open this playlist that contain all of the episodes of this series, or you can watch this video. I'm sure you're gonna like that. The choice is yours. Have fun, and I'll see you in the next video.